There was plenty of good football to be played on the practice field at Lambeau Field, but there were plenty of extracurriculars as well. I'll be taking a deep dive into a physical, intense joint practice between the Seahawks and Packers here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in on this Thursday evening, and thanks as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're listening in from Vancouver, Washington, or Globe, Arizona, we appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks holding what really could be considered their final training camp practice, a joint session with the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Plenty of good football, but plenty of extracurriculars as well. I'll be taking a deep dive into an intense practice between the two NFC foes in Green Bay, dishing out some takeaways coming out of Lambeau Field, including maybe some clarity finally emerging on the offensive line, and 10 players to watch when the Seahawks and Packers duel in the actual preseason game coming up at Lambeau on Saturday. This episode brought your way courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks, in what is now becoming a regular tradition for the post-Pete Carroll Seahawks. Seattle hit the road to meet up with Green Bay for a joint practice a couple days before their scheduled preseason finale at Lambeau Field. And Mike Macdonald's talked about this a lot since he took over as the new head coach a little over a year and a half ago. He views these practices as a great opportunity to be able to test his team's mettle and see where they are at before the season arrives, while still having control over the elements that you're not going to get in a preseason game. Just a few examples of things that can happen. You can have quick whistles. You can set the tempo and the rhythm. You can make it that it is a thud period instead of a taking guys to the ground tackling period. Those are things that are not going to be happening in a true game setting, which is why a lot of teams don't play their starters very much, if at all, in the preseason. They want to take that risk out of play. They want to be able to have as much control as possible. You can't completely control injuries, but the Seahawks for the last 2 years now have done joint practices. Last year, they were in Nashville with the Titans before their preseason game. This year in Green Bay before Saturday's finale, the final dress rehearsal with the Packers at Lambeau Field. And unfortunately, the biggest headlines coming out of this joint practice, it's not abnormal, but there was a lot of post-whistle theatrics in Green Bay today. Multiple scuffles. They were all recorded because unlike Seattle's practices where fans have their phones taken away from them, apparently Green Bay fans are able to take video, and that's what was happening today. Those videos getting posted on social media. So you got to see some of the anger, some of the tempers flaring after snaps, and it happened on both fields. Now, the ones that were actually picked up on camera, at least the ones I've seen, got to see Ernest Jones getting after it with tackle Zach Tom, and Tom later got booted out of practice when he and Devon Witherspoon got in it. Both Jones and Witherspoon threw a little bit of a haymaker in there, but they got to stay on the field. So there was tempers flaring. There was certainly frustration boiling over. In the dog days of August, though, this is not abnormal. In fact, I think if you see a joint practice that does not have this happen at least a couple times, you have to wonder if your guys showed up to play, because that's just the way. Even when I was playing high school ball, when you were doing scrimmages, like this kind of stuff would happen. So tempers tend to boil over, especially these guys. They're tired of training camp. They're tired of these practices. They want to get to where they can hit people. And so when you get the trash talking going, that's what happens in these settings. And I thought Mike Macdonald hit the hammer on the nail after this practice with his comments when he was asked what he thought about this intensity at the joint practice today with the fighting that happened. And he said, it's somewhere in the middle. It's hard to tell what happened, who said what. You want your guys to defend their guys. There's a line, whether we go past that line, and I don't think we did, which is good. Our guys stayed composed. but some of these things do tend to happen. Our guys handled it pretty well. Mike Macdonald, I've seen it at Seahawks practices when they're just by themselves. Like, there's going to be skirmishes. It is a training camp setting. It is a practice setting. The Seahawks go at each other. You add another team in the mix. And I do wonder, there's a lot of guys in this team that were with the Seahawks last year when they lost that primetime game to the Packers. And Green Bay beat them up at the line of scrimmage and outmuscled them, ran all over them. They were the more physical team. I'm wondering if there was some lingering feelings from that game that showed up in this particular practice, because those kind of things don't get let go easily by players. And the Seahawks are going to look at that game and say, if we could have won that, we're in the postseason. And again, a lot of these guys were on this team last year. So I do wonder if emotions were boiling over a little bit from that. That is something to consider here. The other fight that broke out, the other one that was reported, apparently a Packer and Anthony Bradford got into the other side. That shouldn't surprise anybody. Anthony Bradford's gotten into like 3 or 4 of those at Seahawks practice. Like, that's what he does. He gets under guys' skin, and he's not a guy that's going to back down. If you're messing with one of his teammates, he's going to get involved. He's going to defend his guy, as Mike Macdonald said. So those were a couple things that showed up. There was a skirmish with Ken Walker after he scored in the end zone. Then really what I found interesting, and Leonard Williams voiced his displeasure with this after practice, speaking with reporters, that you had Packers players that were coming over when the two teams split up after practice and they went to their separate sidelines. You had Packers players that were still coming over and talking trash. And some of these guys were injured. They didn't even practice, apparently, and they were talking smack. And Seattle's players dished it back out. So maybe that's more, maybe that's more normal than what I'm thinking it is. I think the skirmishes in practice are, but usually when practice is over, those kind of things stop. That apparently didn't happen at Lambeau. So those emotions, they continued on to the tail end of practice and after practice. Nonetheless, Mike Macdonald would view this as a very successful day. You got a lot of really good work, even if Jordan Love didn't do much because he's recovering from a left thumb injury. You are going up against backup quarterbacks, but still, you got a lot of good reps against a physical football team, a Packers squad that has a lot of depth on both sides of the ball. They've invested a lot of draft capital in their lines on both sides. So this is a good litmus test for the offensive line and defensive lines for the Seahawks, and plenty of fun stuff to talk about coming out of this. But of course, as I said, the biggest talking point, there's a lot of fans wondering, well, why would a player throw a punch? I've never understood that when the guy's got a helmet on, why you would do that. But in the heat of the moment, guys do things. And like Mike Macdonald said, these things tend to happen when you get football players together that are in an intense environment. They're preparing for the season. Those are things that tend to happen in these joint practices. When I come back, away from the fighting, what actually happened on the field in terms of football play, I'm going to dive into some of the reports coming out of Lambeau Field and look towards some things that Mike Macdonald informed on afterwards, going into this final preseason game and heading towards the start of the regular season. That'll be coming up next here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. August 26th, officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer in the MVP race. Last year, Josh Allen won it for the Bills. I think Lamar Jackson gets his revenge this year. Or you can crown your champion in August, whether you think it's going to be an Eagles repeat or an upstart team, such as the Vikings or the Texans stealing the Lombardi. Or parlay your division winner, dark horse. Maybe you think the Saints are going to stun everyone and win the NFC South. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. That's your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks having their final training camp practice, whether the Seahawks want to call it that or not, a padded joint practice, pretty much full go other than getting guys to the ground. That still happens some in this practice, but the Seahawks and Packers getting after it, and really the final tune-up for the starters for the Seahawks. They won't have any of their starters playing in Saturday's game. There might be one or two exceptions to that, but it sounded like from what Mike Macdonald said after practice that we're not going to be seeing any starters out there. This is going to be about the young guys. This is going to be about the bottom of the roster players getting extended opportunities. But there was plenty to take away from today's practice at Lambeau Field. And I want to start off with a discussion point here that we've talked about a lot the last couple of weeks, because Ken Walker III, he really has been in and out of practice, and it sounds like that's really going to be the way that this season is going to play out. Mike Macdonald hinted today that that's very much the way that he's going to be handling Ken Walker III from this point forward. So I'm not expecting a change on that front from how the Seahawks are going to be handling him, but you got to see K9 out there, full pads, getting a lot of reps against the Green Bay Packers, and he was getting under Green Bay's skin a little bit. They were getting frustrated with the success that he was having running the football, including a touchdown in the red zone. And again, there was a skirmish after that. So Ken Walker III being healthy, Mike Macdonald sounded like he came out of this feeling good. So they are going to be cautious with how much of a workload they give him. That's the way it's been all offseason, all of training camp. I would expect now that the next few days, obviously he's not going to be playing in that preseason game, but they are going to be getting him rested up and ready to go, making sure they take care of that foot that has been sore at times. I think it's good news that you have K9 getting reps in a environment like a joint practice, because that's the closest he's going to get to a real game. He's not going to be playing in any of these preseason games. Get him some chances, have guys hitting him against a really good defense that's physical. I think that's really good news for the Seahawks. Second big thing that jumped out for me today, I did not get to go to Lambeau. Originally was going to be there for the joint practices, but I've got contacts that were there. I got a number of other reporters that I work with, that I'm friends with, that I was able to clarify some of this with. But there's some clips out there. Shaquille Griffin getting his hands on pass breakups, Reek Woolen as well. To me, the Shaquille Griffin development is the most exciting, because to this point, we really haven't gotten to see much of what Shaquille Griffin can do. He was gone for most of training camp for personal reasons, just came back last week, and they have been gradually getting him up to speed, but had a bunch of pass breakups, including one in their red zone 2-minute drill period. You're seeing this guy come out and start to get his feet underneath him. He's figuring out the defense, and clearly Griffin's a good player. He started a lot of games in this league. He played well for Minnesota last year. So maybe that competition with Josh Jobe, I still think Josh Jobe, because he's been there, he's been available, and he's had a good camp. He's looked good in the preseason. I don't see the Seahawks just shuffling in Shaquille Griffin over him. However, now that he's back, and we know that he was gone for personal reasons, it wasn't something that I'm sure he enjoyed doing. I'm sure he would have rather been out on the practice field with the Seahawks. But getting him out there, and now he's starting to make those plays on the football that we expect from Shaquille Griffin. And he's starting to show the veteran mentality that he brings to the equation. And he's still a guy that can run pretty darn fast. Maybe he's not a 4.3 guy anymore, but low 4.4s, that's still good enough to get the job done. And so I think it's really encouraging now, because he had a couple good practices last week. I think this is a great stepping stone for him going towards the season, where even if the Seahawks only use him for a handful of snaps, you have the flexibility to play 4 corners potentially in dime sets if you want to. I don't know how much they'll be doing that, but at minimum, he is going to be pushing Josh Jobe when the season starts, and Jobe's going to have to continue to play well, because if he doesn't, then it'll be Shaquille Griffin time. I think it's exciting to see that he is starting to get his feet underneath him, and he's starting to play the way the Seahawks were hoping he was going to when they brought him back as a free agent this summer. Third thing that jumped out, I want to talk offensive line for a while here, because to this point, this has been a talking point really since the start of OTAs. Who's going to be the center? Who's going to be the right guard? And Anthony Bradford, at this point, I would be absolutely stunned if he is not starting at right guard for the Seahawks in the season opener against the 49ers. He has been the starter, getting the lion's share of the reps over Christian Haynes and the rest of the competition for the last 3.5 weeks. He might have started training camp behind Christian Haynes, but he very quickly leapfrogged over him, and he's never looked back. And he's played well in preseason games. From what I was told today, had a solid afternoon, or late morning, early afternoon in Green Bay as well. They've been happy with the consistency from Anthony Bradford, which that's been the biggest issue. Now, can he do that in the regular season? Can he stay consistent against the best of the best week in, week out? That's where the test is going to be. But to me, he has won that job outright this year. and he continues to get the job done, coming to the practice field and taking care of his business, which he didn't always do his first 2 years in the league in training camp. And so I think that's a strong development for Seattle. The biggest question mark is still the center position. I think that Seattle's 99% decided on this front. I wouldn't be shocked if they've already made the decision that Jalen Sundell is going to be starting against San Francisco. They did get Olu Oluwatimi back in the practice field, though, for this joint practice. He got some reps with the ones. So the Seahawks are not completely moving away from that yet at this point. But Sundell was still getting most of the reps with the first team. Mike McDonald admitted that afterwards. Yeah, he's getting the first team reps. I just think that now, barring some kind of an injury or just an utter collapse, and I don't even know if we'll see Jalen Sundell on Saturday. If the Seahawks don't play him, that's telling right there. And I would think Oluwatimi, this could be a situation where Federico Moranguez and Mason Richmond are playing the entire game at the center position. They may not play either one of their top two centers. It remains to be seen how much they are going to pull guys back for this preseason finale. Once the starter's not in the lineup, who are the second-tier guys that they're like, you know what, we're going to save him this week and not play it. But I could see Seattle doing that where both those guys aren't playing, and then you're sitting like, okay, so have they made their decision or have they not? But if you saw Oluwatimi get some reps out there, you could have the hunch that Jalen Sundell has won that job. Or maybe it's, hey, Olu, we're going to give you a chance to get some of these snaps you didn't get the last 2 weeks. And if you play really well, then maybe we have to reconsider our decision. But I think this is Jalen Sundell's job at this point, based on what I've seen in games and in practices. It just feels like one of those situations where if he starts the regular season and doesn't play well, Seattle can easily turn back to Oluwatimi being healthy. But I just think Sundell has done too much in this training camp in the preseason. He has earned that opportunity to start. And maybe some will say, well, Oluwatimi's not been healthy, but he hasn't been a long-term starter either. This is not a guy that has enough on his resume that he could, miss a big chunk of camp. And if somebody else emerges, hold on to his job. That's not the situation that he's in. So I think that is Jalen Sundell's job. We'll see. Maybe the Seahawks have other plans, but it looks like they are very much leaning in that direction, that they're going to have Jalen Sundell playing next to Gray Zabel. Those two from North Dakota State, former college roommates, have great chemistry, obviously built in because of that. I expect the Seahawks are going to have those two and Anthony Bradford starting in the interior. It sounds good for Charles Cross being ready for week one. He got some team reps today in joint practices as he continues to work his way back from surgery for a dislocated finger. And they're going to have Abraham Lucas, who's looked really good and looks healthy. That's the biggest thing. He's stayed healthy. He's been on the field every day. That looks to me like it is going to be the starting offensive line. I don't think there's much drama left. Center would be the only one I could see, maybe just a random switch back to Oluwatimi, but I'm not seeing it. I think it's Jalen Sundell's job. And as I mentioned on the injury front, it's always good to come out of these practices with nothing new. Mike Morris is the one exception to that. We don't know his status. Mike McDonald said he got dinged up and they're evaluating him. But Ken Walker III was out there, as I mentioned. That's big. And Tyrese Knight got great news. They're expecting now that he's going to be able to start working out and practicing again, working his way back into practice. And he's got 2 weeks. I think he's got time to get ready for the season opener, be ready to play against the San Francisco 49ers. So that's really good news for the Seahawks. And Uchenna Nwosu in pads doing an individual thing before practice today. Got through it without a hitch, looked really good, according to Mike McDonald, working with Adam Durde. It feels like he's closing in on getting some action in practice with pads on, or at least with a helmet, and getting involved in some of that stuff. And maybe that positions him to be ready for week one. I'd say week 2 or week 3 is probably the safer bet right now. I don't think you're going to force the issue, but if he's ready, he's ready. So we'll see what ends up happening on that front. It's still a really positive injury update. The only other one that was kind of murky coming out of today was with Torrey Horton, who tweaked his ankle in the preseason game against the Chiefs. He wanted to continue playing, but they took him out. He has not been practicing the last couple of days. It sounds like they are just being cautious with him, and there's optimism about him being ready for week one. But that is something to watch, especially with the fact that he seemed to have leapfrogged over Marquez Valdes-Scantling. If he's not healthy for week one, now you have to keep Marquez Valdes-Scantling, even if they were considering the possibility of moving on. So that might cost somebody a roster spot when we get to the beginning of the season. And those are the kind of things that can happen this time of year. So that's one to keep an eye on, but it did seem generally like they're not that concerned they feel like he's going to be ready for week 1, but they're going to be cautious with him, especially since he was coming off another injury and really only had been 100% healthy at the start of training camp. They're going to make sure that he is right. But I thought for the most part that these injury updates were pretty encouraging from Mike Macdonald with Saturday's preseason finale and only 2 weeks away from the start of the 2025 regular season. Coming up next, speaking of that preseason game, there may not be any starters playing, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have significance. I'm going to be breaking down 5 offensive and 5 defensive players that I'm going to be watching closely in this final dress rehearsal at Lambeau Field. Don't go away. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monarch Money. Most people can't name their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving a lot of money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. When I first started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on pizza delivery. Now I'm budgeting a little bit smarter and saving some money for other expenses popping up in my life. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals such as diving into your investments. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Don't let the financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNFL. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. The Seahawks will wrap up their preseason on Saturday against the Green Bay Packers. The real game happened today in terms of starters getting reps in a joint practice. If you're looking to see Sam Darnold or Ken Walker, Jack Smith and Jigba, or any of those players, you might be able to see them on the sideline sipping on a drink with their cap on. They are not going to be suiting up. They're not going to be playing in this preseason finale for the Seahawks. But that doesn't mean that it isn't an important game. There are plenty of guys who are on this roster, but they're backups. They're going to be on the 53 that need experience, that have a chance to play a ton of snaps in an NFL game environment. And there's certainly going to be some bubble guys. They're still battling for one of those last couple spots. And then you have your veterans and your rookies that maybe are far outside the bubble looking in, that don't have a chance to make the team. This could be their last chance to play in an NFL game. So there's a lot in the line for different reasons for the guys that are going to be suiting up for the Seahawks in this game. As far as players I'm going to be watching, it's got to start and finish with who's going to be under center for the entire game for the Seattle Seahawks. And that's going to be Jalen Milroe. According to Mike Macdonald, he's going to start and he is expected to play the entire game. They don't want to play Drew Lock or Sam Darnold. That told me there's going to be a lot of second stringers that aren't going to be suiting up in this game either. They got a lot of reps today in joint practice. Seattle is going to put most of their 53-man roster into bubble wrap, but Jalen Milroe is clearly the third quarterback, and he's a third-round pick. He's a rookie. He needs snaps. So this is going to be a great opportunity for him to get extended action and really attack the entire offense, everything that he's being asked to do, whether that is reading the defense, going through his progressions, orchestrating the huddle, every little thing that comes with game experience, he's going to get the chance to do that. And so I think this is a massive opportunity for him. This is not a Russell Wilson 2012 type situation where if he goes out and lights it up and then you got a quarterback controversy. Seattle has their top two guys and they want to keep them healthy. That's why you're not going to see Drew Lock in this game either. They want Jalen Milroe to get a ton of run in this game. He needs the reps. He needs the experience in Clint Kubiak's offense, and they need the chance to evaluate him. So number 6 easily the player I'm going to be watching the most in this contest. A guy I expect he's going to hand the ball off to a lot in this game is Damian Martinez. You might see some George Halani, but I could see this being a game where Damian Martinez and Jacardia Wright and Tyus, I think those three are going to get the vast majority of the snaps in this game. Martinez, I'm expecting, is going to play probably most of the first half. He might play beyond that because he's clearly the fourth running back right now, and he's a rookie. You want to get him the experience, build off what he did last week. So I'm going to be seeing what he looks like. Can we see a few catches out of the backfield? Does he get some pass protection opportunities? Does he play some special teams in this game? That is still an area that there's major question marks with him because he didn't really do it in college. So I'm going to be watching Damian Martinez really closely in this game. As for the receiver position, I don't expect to see the first 5 or 6 guys really play much, if at all, in this game. It is going to be about those bottom of the roster guys getting a ton of snaps. Steven Sims Jr. is the one curiosity for me here at the receiver position. And of course, I could mention Tyrone Broden and some of these guys who maybe have a shot at a practice squad position with another strong game. But Steven Sims Jr. has been out for a good chunk of training camp. Before he had an injury, though, I had him right in the mix to win a roster spot because of his kick and punt return ability. He got a lot of chances to do that in Green Bay today. I'm wondering if they're going to give him an extended run on offense and get him some special teams reps here to just see if he maybe still can sneak onto this roster. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to do that. Practice squad absolutely could be an insurance policy, but if he goes out and has a couple really nice returns, it might open up some discussion for the Seahawks before roster cuts on Tuesday. So I want to see what Steven Sims looks like, how healthy he is, and on offense and on special teams, see where he fits in for the Seahawks. And on the offensive line, 2 guys that are in a little different position. Bryce Cabledew, I felt like was very underwhelming most of training camp. He got owned in one-on-ones regularly. He was struggling during team periods. I just didn't see him splash. There wasn't a set of plays where it's like, okay, I can see he's starting to figure it out. It just kind of felt like he was stuck in the third-team offense, and he wasn't finding traction. They were moving him at different positions. He got some action back at tackle. He played both guard spots. But since the preseason game started, the light switch has come on for Bryce Cabledew, and you're seeing the athleticism. You're seeing some of the finishing ability, some of the physicality that he brings to the mix. And he has jumped over Satawa Lamea. That has been going on now for more than a week. He has been the second string left guard. He can play on the right side. If he goes out and has another really good game in Green Bay, Seattle might be put in a position where if they want to hold on to him, they're going to have to keep him on the roster because he could be a guy that puts enough good film out there for the rest of the league to see with the athletic profile, all the starting experience he had in a Power 4 conference. There will be other teams that need line help that will be more than happy to pluck him off waivers if he's got enough good film out there. To this point, he's looked pretty good. He's had his opportunities. Can he do it again? I think if he has a really good game, he is going to put some pressure on the Seahawks coaching staff in terms of who can we risk to lose on the waiver wire and wondering whether or not he's a guy that you can do that with. And as for Mike Jarrell, we've had the question about it from a few of you on here. We've had Mike Jarrell, Rob, and I making this team on all of our 53s. I still think he's on the 53-man roster, but he hasn't played a ton of snaps in the preseason. And undrafted rookie Amari Kite has played a lot more than him. He's played ahead of him in preseason games. That has not been the case in the practice field, so I'm still very skeptical that Amari Kite has passed over him. And Mike Jarrell has just way more upside in terms of athleticism. Amari Kite did not test well at all. And he's a guy that couldn't get on the field at Alabama, had to transfer to UCF. I think Mike Jarrell's still in this team, but Mike Jarrell's going to get a lot of snaps in this preseason finale. I want to see how he looks there. And if this is a game where Amari Kite looks better, that might be another one where Seattle starts to have some decisions to make here. Do we want the athlete that hasn't really been polished yet, or do we want the guy that's a more polished blocker that doesn't have the traits and the upside? It creates a really interesting dynamic on the offensive line for John Benton and the rest of this coaching staff to figure out, not just with 53-man roster, but who they're going to be bringing back to the practice squad if they clear the waiver wire. As for the defensive side of the football, I got a couple guys off the edge that I'm going to be watching. Connor O'Toole coming in first for me, and he had a great preseason opener, was pretty quiet in the second game against Kansas City. He still seems pretty wide-eyed out there. This is a former receiver that hasn't played a lot of college snaps off edge because he had some injury issues. When he's been healthy, you can see the explosiveness. You see that receiver background. There's pass rushing tools. I just need to see a more well-rounded game. Can we see some good run defense reps in this game? Can we see him show up on special teams some? And of course, does that pass rushing show up going after Green Bay's quarterbacks, the ones to play in this game? This could be a game that Connor O'Toole plays himself into discussion for the 53. I think he's clearly a practice squad guy. But let's say Tyreek Smith does not play again. That was kind of interesting that he didn't play in that second preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought he looked fantastic throughout training camp. He looked really good in the Raiders game to open the preseason. I'm wondering how much we see Tyreek Smith in this game. And if he plays a lot, what does that say about where he stands in the rest of that edge group, especially with Uchenna Nwosu trending towards being available early in the season? Suddenly, those undrafted guys that maybe have a higher ceiling that you can develop, more club control, it does create a lot of these different discussions that coaching staffs and front offices have to have this time of year when they're figuring out their initial 53-man roster. So I think there's still plenty for Tyreek Smith to play for in this game. As for the linebacker position, it's all about Jamie Sheriff. And I'm very intrigued by how Mike McDonald has successfully worked with hybrid linebackers in the past. And I just think that Jamie Sheriff, there's still a lot to be excited about. There's clearly a ton for him to work on at this new position, being off ball, but they're still using him some off the edge. He's going to get a lot of run in this game. I want to see how comfortable he is against Green Bay's run scheme, being able to quickly decipher, getting past blocks, being able to read where the ball's going based on the blocking scheme. There's so much to learn for a guy making the switch to off-ball linebacker. He has made strides in training camp and with a limited preseason action that he's had. He's going to be a player I'm watching. I don't know if he gets on this roster or not, but if he goes out and plays well, that hybrid ability gives him an advantage over a lot of his competitors at that off-ball linebacker position. And in the secondary, Shaquille Griffin is going to play some snaps in this game, I think. Josh Jobe maybe plays some. You're not going to see Devon Witherspoon or Reek Woolen. But Nehemiah Pritchett, this is a great chance to really put an exclamation point on what's been a really strong second training camp and preseason. We've seen him pick off passes, get his hands on passes for breakups. He just looks more comfortable. He looks more confident. I want to see that consistency. I want to see one more really good game from him where he gets his hands on the football once or twice. Maybe he gets that second pick. I want to see him really cap this off. To me, he's on the roster, but now he's trying to push his way towards trying to make Josh Jobe's life tough and make Shaquille Griffin's life tough and being on their rearview mirror and closing. This is a great chance for him to cap things off and remain in the peripheral to get snaps at some point in his sophomore season for the Seahawks on defense. And at safety, Jarek Reed II will be the other one in the secondary that I'm watching. It still feels like both he and Tayakata, I mean, they might be playing for one of the final spots on this roster because Seattle's got such a good depth at safety and they're good special teams players, particularly though Jarek Reed. And Reed just has more traits. He is a more athletic player. He was a 6th-round pick. He's now more than a year removed from his knee injury. Did not start training camp off well, but he had a pick late in camp on Drew Lock. He's starting to show up in these preseason games. He's starting to look like the player that I was excited about, and the Seahawks certainly were excited about when they drafted in the 6th round before that ACL injury late in his rookie season. I want to see how he plays, getting a ton of snaps. I expect he's going to start in this game at safety for the Seahawks. I want to see if he can play his way onto this roster or force Seattle's hand here, wondering, is this a guy because of his traits and his upside that we can't risk cutting? It could be one of those really challenging decisions where they have to figure out who's safer to cut at a variety of positions. And maybe Jarek Reed is a guy that they think they can't sneak to the practice squad for a variety of reasons. For Seattle's hand, that's what I want to see from Jarek Reed. I want to see him be a playmaker. I want to see him be aggressive, getting downhill, making plays in the run game. I want him to get his hands on the football if possible, and of course contribute on special teams and look like the player he was before that injury. We're starting to see that here as of late in camp and early in the preseason. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be teaming up with Nick Lee, the two of us on Blue Friday. We will be dishing out some storylines to watch going into this preseason finale. So make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.